Like ripping a Band-Aid off or that deadline for Miss Shop and Mr. Widerman's 10-page paper, just because you know something's coming doesn't necessarily make it any easier. That's how it felt when Governor Pritzker canceled the rest of the school year last Friday. On today's episode, Mr. Widerman and I sit down to talk as Pritzker makes his announcement that the school year is canceled about what it means to lose out on the milestones of senior year. Mr. Widerman also tells a story about a typewriter, which I did not give him permission to tell, and he finally answers the question, is a hot dog a sandwich or not? And this time, I cannot disagree with him. A hot dog is not a sandwich. He'll give his recommendations, play a little bit of this or that, and in general, enjoy this interview. So sit back, relax. Mr. Widerman and I had a great time talking. Hope you enjoy it. All right, so I am recording now. Oh, let me get the correct gallery view. Test, test, test.
Testing, testing. I can hear you.
Hey, we are both on, we are both using Solorio provided microphones. So
Provided is a word.
This is brought to you by the Solorio STEM department. We've been
borrowed without permission was the words that I was going to use. But
no. I borrowed with permission. We asked for permission. It was approved.
Might have.
Mine was approved. Mine was approved, and so you're under the umbrella of my approval.
I was approved to use it in my classroom. And this is my classroom right now.
Where is your classroom?
It's here.
That brings me to my favorite first question, which is go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where you are right now.
Okay. Hello, world. I am Samson Widerman. I'm here at my apartment in Pilsen, Chicago, living the good life. Last week was spring break. This week, I'm trying to do remote teaching, and things are weird. Governor of Illinois is probably going to announce this afternoon/evening that schools are closed to the end of the year, and I expect to get some reports of sadness. But otherwise, personally, my life is going well. How are you, Johnny Buse?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm looking right now, and so this show will run next week, so it'll be old news by then, but it is brand new news as of 10 minutes ago that he officially announced the closure of schools. Yeah, I mean, I feel right now I'm feeling a little bit, I feel a little bit numb about it. I'm going to miss going into the building. At the same time, I recognize that this is the choice that's safest for all of us. And in the long, it's kind of hard right now to put a month and a half into the perspective of years and be like, oh, this is a month and a half of loss that over the years will feel smaller. But yeah, it's definitely different times. And certainly
I'm trying to come at it from an empathetic way because, like you, I'm also a little numb about it. Like, I don't care about there not being a prom. But I do care in that, like, my students really care about this. Yeah. And, I don't read a lot of CNN articles, but CNN had a really interesting article yesterday about how this pandemic is affecting teens in particular. And a lot of what the article talked about is that we're kind of like stealing away some like the most important times in their childhood, with a focus on like prom, with a focus on graduation, taking the SAT, so many things that are like really big in our students' lives, not just like their lives so far, but like what will be the grand scope of their lives. That's kind of taken away because of this. So I understand that they're going to be really hurt. I think I actually am predicting that after today, there will be like a strong feeling of like mourning among our students, especially the 12th graders that I teach, because they're really losing something that they've been looking forward to for a long time. Our school really, really hypes up prom and graduation and grad night when they all go to Six Flags and like ride roller coasters until dawn. It's sad.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the two pieces where there's these ceremonies as individual milestones and individual celebrations, but also things that families kind of build, entire weekends around, excuses for traveling, for visiting.
This means
Yeah,
so much to parents, to grandparents, to see their students graduate high school. I mean, the proud look on their faces, we're not going to get to see that this year.
right.
That's
And
sad.
what do you teach, Mr. Widerman? What classes for people who don't know?
So I actually teach 3 sections of college seminar. So I'm working right now with a lot of students to finalize their post-secondary plans,
Mm-hmm.
which are also super up in the air right now.
Yeah.
But then I have 2 sections of English, 2 different courses actually for seniors, one called Global Discourse and one called Law and Literature. So interesting stuff, I think, that I'm giving my English students to do right now. In terms of my work for college seminar, it's been very much on an individual level. I'm like reaching out
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of individual kids, like, hey, where you at? What's up?
Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, so you're really immersed in the senior world because I teach entirely juniors. I have a similar
Mm-hmm.
schedule, English 3 junior seminar, so kind of the same schedule as you, but just 1 year back. And for juniors, there's a sense of, well, we'll fill you back in September. But yeah, that's lost for seniors.
Yeah,
Um,
our seniors aren't going to get this time back. And also, I've thought about that a little bit in regards to our current junior class is that, whatever work you were planning to do to prepare them for the SAT, we're going to have to either do or completely repeat in the fall if they have to take the SAT in the fall.
yeah,
And that's going to change our whole plan for the year for
I
seniors.
mean, and it's going to be, I think, looking down the line, college admissions are about to change, at least for a
Mhm.
temporary amount of time. Um, because I mean, we were already moving towards a lot of schools kind of saying, we're not going to look at these standardized tests. And will this kind of be, will a bunch of other schools now say, look, we don't need the SAT or ACT this year?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's going to be probably a lot of really big shifts in the post-secondary landscape. I think a lot fewer students this year are going to enroll in college
Mhm.
than maybe ever before,
Yeah.
right? Any parents that had savings set aside for college are probably using those up right now just to pay rent. And then if families had accounts that were maybe invested, stocks perhaps, mutual funds, I mean, the value of those has decreased so much that they may not be able to go through with the plans that they had for their children, that they had been saving up for so long.
What would you
So
say?
things
Yeah,
are going to change.
what would you say to a college? I mean, because we've got. I doubt we have any university admissions officers listening. But if we did, what would you say as somebody who's working with prospective college students every day? What would you say to them from your side of things? What would you say? Okay, looking to next year's admissions, or even this year's admissions,
Yeah.
what do you want them? What do you want them to be thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I'm still mostly an English teacher. I don't really consider myself a college counselor. But like number one thing that comes to mind that I would say is like, well, college needs to cost less. Like it can't be this expensive to go, right? Nobody
Yeah.
can, I mean, nobody, obviously some people can, but our students can't afford to just be students right now. They have to be so much more. They have to be students. They have to be family members. They need to be essential workers. They're going to be really, really busy, and they're not going to be able to pay
Right.
tuition as it has been in the past 2 decades.
I could have guessed you were going to say that based on your window decoration in the background.
I'm a teacher. I have no political opinions,
Ah!
and I express no political opinions. Just kidding.
Um,
I'm full of them.
yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I have disclaimers, right? You don't have to believe what I believe. And when I express a personal opinion, I'm not going to present it as a fact.
And teaching is in and of itself a political act. All right, I'm going to go get this child, and then I'm going to ask you a question about choosing books to read.
Cool. Can I tell a story while you go get the
Yeah,
child?
go for it. Go for
I
it.
had a story that I wanted to tell. So while Johnny's out of the room, I didn't plan on talking so much about college. I actually wanted to talk about typewriters. I had written that in my email to him when he asked me what I wanted to talk about. And the reason I wanted to talk about typewriters is because I actually learned how to type on an old electric typewriter. My grandmother, Claire Widerman, she was a typing instructor. In fact, it was one of her positions at the high school that I actually graduated from on Long Island, Huntington High School. And at the time that she was teaching typing, typing was a really valuable skill, right? Most people didn't type. And if you had the ability to type, you could get hired in an office to be a secretary, to, type things up, type up memos on a typewriter, of course. So my sister and I were old enough to learn how to type, she brought out these big electric typewriters. Oh my God, a baby. And she used these electric typewriters to learn how to type. And I want to actually tell one of her favorite stories, if I've got the time, which is one time she was teaching a typing class. And at the end of class, she went over to one of the typewriters and a bunch of the keys were missing. And she wrote down on a piece of paper all of the keys that were taken, and actually took the time to reorganize the letters until they spelled out the name of one of the students on her roster. And she was able to get all the keys back because she solved the puzzle that the kid left for him as part of his crime.
Is this like your grandma or something?
This is my grandmother, Claire Widerman. She was a typing teacher. I told you I was going to talk about typewriters.
That's all that you did tell me that. There we go. There's the typewriting segment.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't think there are typewriters.
Can we see the baby?
Yep.
Oh, she is.
There
really
she
cute.
is.
So precious.
Yeah, mom is on a work call. That's what the working from home double whammy. RT right here gets lots of good screen time. This is going to be an interesting. I mean, these kids between the ages of 0 and 5, who normally wouldn't be getting, who wouldn't be doing digital learning on screens right now, at least. I mean, they're getting exposed. I don't want to say exposed because I don't think screens are that bad, but they're spending so much time looking at people on screens.
Maybe
because of this. I mean,
but I also think that they're probably getting a lot more mental stimulation than they might otherwise be getting in like a child care environment where maybe there's a lot of children distributed with very few adults.
Right.
They're getting a lot of attention and a lot of extra care. That's probably good ultimately for their long-term development. Even some of the older kids, like kids who would otherwise be in kindergarten and first grade. I mean, maybe if their parents are doing a lot to keep them stimulated and keep their minds growing, they could be learning a lot right now. It's interesting. I haven't had to think too much about what it's like to parent during this time, or really ever, as a non-parent. Dogs don't count. But it's interesting. I'm actually realizing for like the first time just how many people that I'm very close with have children and take care of children. Because I mean, normally they'd be posting about their work life and their social life on social media, but lately it's just like kids everywhere. So many of them that I didn't realize, especially our coworkers. I mean, so many of our coworkers have families, and I'm seeing now more than ever that they're posting about them online.
Right, and the daily memo.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is just since I've been a parent for 11 weeks, this is just what normal.
You're doing great so far.
Much is. Thank you. I don't know if she'd agree. I mean, she's happy right now. Approval rating at 100% at this. That's a 75% approval rating face at this moment. So
she looks pretty happy.
Yeah, she had a good nap, woke up. Now she's getting to hang out with Uncle Widerman. One of the things we talking about is choosing books. And this is something I think about all the time. And I even thought about some in high school, because it's like, how do these books end up in our curricula? Right. Yeah. So, students show up and they're like, oh yeah, of course these are the books I read because these are the books we read. But, you don't ever repeat a class, plan on it. And so you don't see how these things change over time. But if you go back to Solorio's first days open in 2010, you'd see a different set of books than you see now. So speaking for yourself, when you're thinking about choosing books, what are you thinking about, or what's going into that process?
I love this topic, and the reason I love it is because we've got a school that's willing to invest in our stash of books, in our inventory, really. And I don't think every other teacher has that. I think what it sort of comes down to is the reason that books have been so continuously recycled is that's what's in the book room, right? That's what's there. That's what's available. That's what costs no more money to purchase. Because if you think about some of the books that are in our curriculum now, if you look back at like previous decades when maybe they first started being taught, they were kind of like avant-garde for the time. They were like, if you think about a book like Fahrenheit 451, I mean,
Right.
in the 50s, that book might have been like kind of explosive. It might have been kind of
Dangerous.
controversial.
Mhm.
Whereas now, I mean, it's speculative fiction, so it kind of has this very retro look at the future, and it's kind of dated in a lot of ways, and is maybe a little less focused on some of the cultural issues that a lot of the speculative fiction we read now is. So students don't connect to it as well as they might some of the other speculative fiction that your class reads, for example. But one of the ways that I tackle about this, other than like reading a ton of articles about it online, is one of my favorite questions to ask people at parties is, what was your favorite book that you read in high school? And it's always interesting because people have the most diverse responses. Sometimes you'll hear those classics like, oh, I read To Kill a Mockingbird, it was the best. I read The Kite Runner. But occasionally it will be something that I've just never even heard of or never thought of introducing to a class. Or it'll be something that I personally think of as being very long and boring and wouldn't think to want to give to a kid.
Mhm.
And yet somebody is just so enthusiastic about it, like their teacher just taught it so well or presented it in a way or framed it in a way that just made it so interesting for them. And so yeah, I keep expanding the books that I've read that are in sort of my piggy bank. I just finished Just Mercy by Brian
Uh-huh.
Stevenson. And I regret that I'm not able to teach that to my law and literature class now.
Right.
If there were a way to distribute books, I would go to our principal right now and be like, hey, can you buy me 35 copies of this? I just read it. It's fantastic. My class needs to read it.
Right.
Because it's so perfect for the class. But hopefully I'll be able to do it next year, and I'll put in that request right away. But I also just read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky.
I'm reading Brothers Karamazov as we speak.
Really?
Yeah.
I did it, split it up. I did sort of like half audiobook, half actually reading, because I've been doing a lot of long runs lately, and it makes me feel very productive to read and run at the same time.
Double whammy.
Oh yeah. And I'm actually like thinking about ways that I might be able to incorporate Crime and Punishment next year, if not maybe this year. I was able to distribute a couple copies because I wanted my students to do it in book circles, but I'm not sure that's going to happen this year,
Right.
based on how things are organized currently.
So what are you looking for in a book when you're choosing it? Because you mentioned speculative fiction, which for people out there maybe you haven't heard that term. The simple way to think about it is anything that's science fiction or fantasy in old genre terms.
Yeah.
But when you say that, you're saying, oh, well, some of the books you read junior year maybe are more immediately relevant culturally. So that makes me think you're thinking about what's culturally relevant, but then you just talked about Crime and Punishment, which is from the 19th century. So what's going into your decisions in terms of what books you want to watch, or not watch, excuse me, what books you want to read
Yeah, I think
for your
actually
students, not just what you want to read personally.
I feel like I've experienced a little bit of a shift, whereas in previous years I was really, really focused on like cultural relevance. Like I really wanted students to be able to like see themselves in the book and the characters and the authors. And so myself and Karen Schaff, the other English teacher for 12th grade, we we created this really long, extensive list of like choices that students have for when they do book groups in class, and have like a really diverse range of books and authors, everything you can imagine, which I think is really wonderful. What I've been focused on a little more professionally in the past like year and a half or so is taking material that has sort of been like given the labels like boring, and thinking about how I can make that really interesting for kids, but actually more so help them see what's really interesting about it. So as an example, last year I had about 10 of my 10th graders reading To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay.
And initially a lot of them were like regretting their choice. They got to choose from a couple options, a couple of which were amazing, not like young adult novels that I had chosen because they were really culturally relevant. One of them had two Mexican boys as the main characters. One had a gay main character. One had two young girls, one with a mental disability as the main character. Really like thinking about cultural relevance, but a couple kids chose To Kill a Mockingbird. So I was like, cool, let's do this. And they were regretting the choice because they're like, this is boring. That's what they told me. And so I sat down with their group and I talked to them for maybe like 10 or so minutes just about why it's not and why they need to start thinking about what's maybe between the lines. And the more that they could get into the details of the text, the more they would see why this book is considered a classic or why this book is in some ways controversial, and why this is a book that's been taught for so long. And I asked them to like really think about those things as they read, and to look at for maybe some of those themes, such as like loss of innocence and injustice, and think about why are those things interesting in the text? Why is this interesting? Why do you have some people deem this one of the best books of all time? If you've deemed it boring, why? And getting them to think about that, I think was really effective, because I came back to that group maybe a week and a half later, and they were like, okay, we get it now. Like we think this book is really interesting, and we're having an interesting time talking about it. And what I realized is that and maybe this applies very specifically to 10th grade, is that they're at an age where they're starting to see nuance in things, where things that they previously considered boring, they're realizing they considered boring because they couldn't understand them because they were so complicated. And that by being able to like see the nuance, and being able to break down why things are complicated, and argue about those complexities, actually makes those things really, really interesting. And that I think is a way that a book like Crime and Punishment could be really, really interesting for kids.
So,
like if they could just look at a very specific character and consider that character's circumstances and then debate about it and have an argument, both in the scope of the book and even outside.
Right, but right now,
sorry, that was
students
a long ramble.
No, that was fantastic. But that leads me that sounds all hunky dory if we're sitting in class with 10 other students.
Mm-hmm.
We're at home. We're in our basements. We've got Zoom. We got these things. But if I'm a student, or even let's say I know a lot of adults right now who are like, oh great, it's I've got all this time. I might as well try to read Ulysses by myself, which I have on this shelf right here, because this is my shelf of like things I'm not going to try to read by myself. But someone tries to read
someday.
Someone tries to read it by themselves, and they get it. They say, I can't get the nuance. I can't get the nuance here. This is just boring. So what are some things people can do if they're reading something like, look, I know this is a classic. I know this is supposed to be great. I know this offers a mirror of my life and a window into another world, but I just can't see those things right now. The mirror is cloudy. The window is fogged up. How do you clean those surfaces and use and turn these books into something that can help you see better?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been lucky to not have to consider that so much, right? How does an individual go from reading a text to being in conversation with a text? The lovely thing about having, a class full of kids all reading the same book, or in groups reading the same books, is that, I don't have to answer that question. I can get them in conversation with each other, which is so engaging, and also puts a little bit of peer pressure on them. So that they stay engaged and they can have that conversation, not just with the text, but with each other. And I really haven't figured out exactly what that would look like through Zoom. I wish I had an answer, and I'm working on it. I work on that in terms of like how an individual can go from, this is boring to I'm in conversation with this text. I think it just requires practice, practice that we as English teachers get a ton of, right? Because we are always in conversation with the text. We always go into a text with a purpose, which is often like, can I teach this? Would this be a good thing for kids to read?
But that itself,
we always have a purpose for reading.
I mean, what I see there is that it forces you to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
It forces you to ask the book questions of like, okay, even if they're simple questions of like, is the exposition of this book just way too long? Say we're teaching something real old. Let's teach Scarlet Letter. Do I really want to suffer through the custom house thing? Right. And so I think it's not that we have a lot of practice. I think it's that we are always, I don't think you can. I think we are always asking questions. And so that's what I would say to students is, I was reading, what was the book I was reading? I actually stopped reading it. I will give you the Sun. And I just kind of, I put it down for a second. But I honestly got confused by the first chapter because the writing style was so wild. But the act of asking questions about the writing style, I think eventually slides me into the book.
Yeah. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's you have to go into the text with a purpose, right? Something that you want to learn or take away or identify.
Right, for challenging texts. And I think that's why I always give, I think the easy one to do is like, how is this a mirror of your own life? And how is it a window into a totally different world? And I stole that straight from Miss McCart. So all credit to Miss McCart. As anything good that's coming out of my teaching, it was probably stolen from Miss McCart's curriculum.
Really creepy. At the very end of Crime and Punishment, there is no spoilers, okay. No spoilers. There is a very like quick mention of like, there's like a breakout of an epidemic that like people around the main character are getting sick. And it was just like very weird that like that's like the note that the book ended on during this time.
Yeah.
Like,
well, great.
What's happening?
Well, Mr. Widerman, we're going to move into our recommendation part of the show. So I'm going to ask you for some recommendations. Then I'll give you a quick round of this or that. And then I have an Ask Science question for you, which is really more of an Ask Philosophy question. So recommendations, you've already kind of done this, but what book are you recommending right now? Could be something you're currently reading or something you've read recently. What do you recommend for students looking for something to read?
Yeah, I will reiterate Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson.
You're the second person to recommend that.
Really?
Yeah.
Highly recommend. I mean, I just finished it last night before bed. But it's an excellent book. It's really well written. Bryan Stevenson, a hero. And then when you're finished with the book, you can go and watch the movie starring Michael B. Jordan, which
fantastic actor.
Is supposedly really good. Other than that, I don't think I have another recommendation. That's my one.
What are you watching right now? Or what did you watch recently that you really recommend?
I just finished watching a French series on Netflix called Marianne.
Marianne.
Oui, c'est très intéressant.
Oh, parlez-vous français, hein? Oui, oui.
Un petit peu. Oui. It was a really good opportunity to practice some French and learn a few words. But it is a horror series, which was a nice change of pace. It is dubbed in English for those of you who don't like to read subtitles or like to crochet or something while you watch TV.
It's interesting with horror movies or with horror TV. I think I usually would say, do the subtitles, but I feel like with comedies and with horrors, sometimes the subtitles can sort of cut some of the laughs or some of the horror. So, but I think with comedy, you got to go with subtitles still, even though it's unfortunate. But with horror, I would almost be like, well, most of the greatness in horror isn't in the script dialogue itself, but in a lot more of the atmospheric stuff, which the subtitles would take away from. I
disagree. I think the dubbing ruins it.
Well, I'll have to watch it and we'll see it. But I mean, I'm just saying the dubbing does take away from some of the atmosphere. But when you're reading the subtitles, your eyes are on the bottom of the screen too much to fully take in enough of the production design.
Yeah, you have to read fast. Okay,
song. If students want to take yourself back to your senior year of high school, what's one song you would recommend students listen to? Or your freshman year? Just something Mr. Widerman was listening to in high school.
Oh my God. Put on some like Blink-182.
Give me one track.
Like all the small things to care, true things. Yeah, just like
she left me roses by the stairs. Surprises, let me know she cares.
She cares. Yeah. Beautiful. Everybody knows the words. It'd be like a really great song to like be angsty and rock out to. And like we're all feeling a little angsty right now, so just like own it and like let it out.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Widerman, we're gonna do some this or that.
Okay.
So you just gotta go. You gotta go quick. I don't have my this or that list, so I'm gonna do it off the top of my head. All right.
Oh, good luck.
First period off. Oh no, let's do it the first one. Crocs or flip flops?
Flip flops.
Oh, what was that? First period off or eighth period off?
First period off.
April or October?
April.
Fourth period lunch or sixth period lunch?
Fourth period.
Jeans day or PJ day?
Jeans. I don't want to be in PJ in front of my coworkers.
Algebra or geometry?
I don't know. Math B.
Algebra or geometry? There are rules.
No, in New York, we didn't have separate math. This is like old school. Oh, okay. Geometry. Fine.
Physics or earth science?
Earth science.
Fruits or vegetables?
Fruits.
April or October?
You already asked me that.
Did I really?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
April.
Oh, I'm going off the top of my head.
Dogs, not cats.
Oh, right. Dogs or cats. Good.
Barefoot,
how about
no socks.
American
Water,
literature,
not milk.
British literature or American literature?
American literature.
Okay. Salt water or fresh water?
For what?
Oceans
For
or
swimming?
lakes? Oceans or lakes? Can't believe I clarified. I broke my own rule. Okay, and last question is going to be this or that?
That.
Okay. All right, and so for Ask Science, Mr. Widerman, is a hot dog a sandwich?
That's your Ask Science question. No, it's not. Sandwiches have openings on the sides. A hot dog is an opening at the top. You know. Honestly, it's more like a pizza than a sandwich.
That's the first
Is a
no
pizza
it's
a
not
sandwich?
answer. That's the first no it's not answer that I can't think of a counter to.
Because I'm right. It's science.
Wow. I think you've settled it. Hot dogs are not sandwiches because they open at the top, not at the sides. All right, Mr. Widerman, we're going to go do other stuff right now. Thank you for the interview today. And anything else you want to say before we sign off?
This was wonderful. Thanks so much, Johnny B.
Thank you. See you later. Mr. Widerman, thank you so much. That apartment looks sunny and great. Anyways, for all of you out there, keep on reading, keep on writing, enjoy that remote learning, stay in touch with your teachers, and stay safe out there. Signing off for now, this is Mr. Buse.